Okay, Rumi. Rumi part 1. I'm hearing a loud wind coming from the outside. Okay. All right, so let's begin. We're going to look at the poem Mystics Know, which is on page 11. And so before we get into the actual text, I'm going to give you a few introductory words because we need to actually be familiar with some philosophy of Plato. Rumi is here drawing on Platonic philosophy. So in order to really understand what's going on, we have to go back a little bit to Plato and then see how Plato understands knowledge. And then it will become very clear what Rumi is doing here. Right? Remember, I told you that Rumi is influenced by he has 3 influences. He has Islam, Christianity, and Platonic philosophy, right? So if you're familiar with Christianity, you will recognize a lot of concepts in Rumi. Likewise, if you're familiar with Platonic philosophy, you will also recognize some things. Okay, so first let's contrast him with Maimonides a little bit, since I believe that's a test question at some point. So he's actually the opposite of Maimonides, right? He's Maimonides' arch enemy in a way, intellectually, of course, certainly not physically. I'm sure they would have been friends. So remember, for Maimonides, there's 2 main differences, right? Number 1, for Maimonides, where is the place with which we connect to God? What is the part of our bodies with which we connect?
Our brains.
The brain, okay? So for Maimonides, it's intellectual knowledge of God. You receive, right, if your vessel is clean enough intellectually, wide enough intellectually, you will receive wisdom, right? Remember that for Maimonides, divine providence is not just God coming in and performing miracles on your behalf, right? That's old. For Maimonides, God comes in the form of wisdom. And that's how God helps us, right? Move out of our difficult situations. Now, for Rumi, it's going to move the place, the gateway to God. Where is now the gateway to God according to Rumi, Mahmoud? The heart, right? Absolutely. So we're shifting. Right? For Rumi, the mind can only get you so far. The mind is not the right container, is not the right gateway. It's through the heart that we really come to know God, right? So we are already now understanding that there is therefore a knowledge of the heart, right? We don't only know with our minds, we know with our hearts. And so this is not usual, right? In our Western civilization, we only know to know with our minds. Our hearts for us are kind of murky. It's feelings, it's not reliable, it's confused, right? We don't rely on our hearts for knowledge. In this text, we're going to learn about this very specific type of knowledge, which is the knowledge of the heart. So notice that for Rumi, this is this gateway of the heart is to be taken seriously, right? We can take our heart's knowledge seriously. So this is very new. Right? Especially for us, it should sound very new, this idea that the heart can be relied on to know. So we're going to talk about how the heart knows and how it can be still reliable and so forth. So the second aspect that is different between Maimonides and Rumi, first we saw for Maimonides that God is not the origin of suffering, right? Suffering is us. We are going around the world making mistakes, doing evil things, right? And this is how most of the evils occur, right? If you look, you can look at any situation where people die and you can trace it back to a human error somewhere down the line. Most situations, right? When it is, of course, obviously not dying of age, right? Whereas even you could look at the lifestyle, right? In general, right? Early death, suffering, you can always trace it back to human agent. Rumi is going to say the opposite. He's going to say, actually, God is the source of suffering. And suffering actually must be seen as gift from God. So we're going to talk about that next time, actually. Not today. Today we'll talk about the knowledge of the heart. Okay. So let's go into this idea of the poem, which is called Mystics Know, right? This is a different type of knowledge from scientific knowledge. This is mystical knowledge. This is the knowledge of the heart. So before we get into the text, we need to go into Platonic understanding of knowledge, because Rumi is drawing here from the Platonic tradition. So first of all, we should expect that knowledge of the heart will be very different from knowledge of the mind, right? Knowledge of the mind is through intellectual clarity. knowledge of the heart actually is through emotional clarity. Okay, so, and this is, we have not really, most of us haven't experienced emotional clarity because, like the mind, and maybe not even intellectual clarity, right? Our hearts, like our minds, are cluttered and narrow. And this is why most of us have never experienced this emotional clarity. But we're going to talk about that, right? So just like intellectual clarity is knowledge, you see perfectly the emotional clarity. So we should expect that the emotions here will give you a form of knowledge, right? And this is unusual. We don't usually think of emotions as telling us anything, right? Okay, let's go to Plato. Okay, so this is from the Republic, Plato's big work on political philosophy. And in this book, he talks about 4 levels of knowledge. I feel like we're outside. It's so nice. We can hear the trees. So 4 levels of knowledge, right? There's the lowest, and then it gets to the highest level. Does anybody know this, actually, the Platonic line? Anybody studied this? Can illuminate us? Nobody? Okay. What do they teach you in school, really? This philosophy department hasn't taught you this yet. Oh, you're the first-time philosophers, aren't you? That's why. It's my fault. Okay. So we will learn it now. First, and I'll give you an example. Right? First, very low level is called opinion. Opinion is you think it's true because you just think so, right? So we can do an example with, shall we do a COVID example just to be a little bit controversial? Okay. COVID. Yeah, I think, let me get it right, because I'm thinking of the other levels of knowledge. Yeah, yeah, this is good, this is good. Yeah, this is perfect. Okay, you have heard that from some YouTube video, right, that COVID is dangerous. I should do it the other way around, but it doesn't work for my example. So you've heard, right, you've watched a few YouTube videos, and you've decided, yeah, COVID, it's an issue. I need to protect myself. Okay. But you just heard about it. It's a very low level, right? You just heard a rumor that there's a disease that you have a problem with. Next level, belief. Okay, so actually the first level, let me clarify a little more. First level is you just feel that COVID is dangerous. That's just your opinion. Right? And you're talking to other people and they're like, well, do you have any proof? You don't. You just feel it, okay? That's number 1 level, all right? I just, that's how I feel. That's what I think, right? No evidence whatsoever, right? You just like, that's how, and then you have the opposite view, right? COVID isn't real, right? Yeah, I just believe that, period, right? Okay, so any view that has no backup, you just feel it. This is low level of opinion. Next level, belief, you have a little bit of evidence. Maybe you have watched a few videos and seen a few people die on YouTube, or you have seen the opposite, a few people recover on YouTube, depending on which side you're on, right? Now you have a little more, it's not just you have a little more evidence, it's belief. I believe it because, well, I have limited evidence. Second level. Third level is a scientific level. So what would that look like? That proof that COVID kills. So you have the first level, yeah, I feel it kills. Number 2, I saw a couple videos. Number 3, it's scientific level, COVID kills. How would that argument work?
So someone died from it?
No, not yet. That's seeing, right? Scientific is more the deduction from science.
You read a paper?
Yes, you read a paper, scientific paper, right? And this paper is showing how the molecule of COVID, right? I don't know what it does. I haven't looked into that, right? It gets into your system, it destroys everything. Okay, scientific paper certainly doesn't sound like that, but that's the idea. Your scientific research is proving to you now, showing the effects, right? Laboratory experiments and so forth. Now, the last level, this is the level that Rumi is going to borrow from Plato, is the level of intuition. What would that look like? And Epstein, you were almost there. You said it already. What would that look like? The highest level of knowledge that COVID kills.
Seeing it. Physical proof.
Even worse, not just seeing it.
Experience.
You get COVID and you're sitting there with all the tubes up your face, right? And now you're like, oh yeah, COVID sucks, right? So that's the highest level where you actually experiencing it. You're in the presence of COVID. COVID is in your system and you have this profound knowledge, right? Which is way beyond science, right? If a scientist were to come to your bedside and tell you, I can prove to you COVID doesn't exist, and you're sitting there, what would you say? Would you believe the scientist? No, you'd be like, yo, don't talk to me. Right? You don't know what I'm going. Because, okay, so are you starting to see the different kind of knowledge? A scientist will come to you with research and arguments and tell you COVID is not lethal, and you are here dying of COVID, right? You will not believe that scientist, no matter how smart they are, how many PhDs they are, because you are having now an experience in the flesh. Are you seeing the difference? This is very important. Now, Rumi is going to borrow this when it comes to the experience of God, right? He's going to borrow this whole, and so we're going to redo it this time with does God exist, right? The question, does God exist? There are different levels of knowledge, and you will see that the highest intuition is what, what's his face? Rumi is talking about here. Okay, so let's begin. With regards to the existence of God, what would the opinionated person say to you about the existence? If they believe that God exists, how would they put it to you? Level of opinion. Michal? Yeah, you're like, yeah, he just does. Right? You're like, I just know he does, and you have no backup, right? You're just like, I feel it, I'm sure of it, just believe, right? So that would be very low level, right? What would be the next way to put it in a belief level? Yes?
I don't know, for me, before, like, I wasn't religious, but then you go through something in life, and then you slowly realize, even though, like, it's not something physical, like, you start to believe.
You're on a higher level than you think. So I'm going to hold you in the parentheses. That's already a level of experience. It's a very high level. This level is belief, intellectual belief. How would it look like? You have some ground to believe. Yeah. That's actually the third level. So hold that thought, Michel. Okay, exactly. Good. That works. I'll come back to that. Hussein? Yeah, very excellent. Same thing, right? Oh, my parents told me he exists, or my church tells me he exists, or scripture tells me he exists. No proof. Someone told you. You haven't gone and verified yet what they said, but someone told you. That's belief. Oh, okay, then therefore I believe it. I believe what they say, but I haven't yet verified it. Still very low. Now, the third one, the scientific. Who was saying that? I think it was you. Now, say what you said. The proof.
Oh, right. I believe God exists because somebody had to create the world.
Yes. There are a number of actually intellectual proofs of God that were developed in the Middle Ages. I'll give you a few. They're very fun. One of them is like, the world has amazing design. There must therefore be a designer, right? The world is so well ordered that it's hard to believe that it came by chance, like some of us do, right? It's so well, perfectly designed. There must be an architect, right? Even the great atheistic French philosopher from the 18th century, Voltaire, he was complete atheist, and yet he said, when I look at the world, or he said it like this, he said, when I see a watch, right? We don't have watches anymore, so I'm going to remind you what it looks like, right? When I see a watch, I cannot conceive of it existing without a watchmaker. So even Voltaire, right? If you want to write his name, Voltaire, very famous atheistic, staunchly atheistic philosophers, wrote masses against religion, right? If you read anything he wrote, he's constantly making fun of religion. And yet he says this, even Voltaire was convinced by this argument. It's called the argument by design. If there is a watch, there must be a watchmaker, right? This is one of the most convincing ones. And then there's a few others which are more playing with words, but this one is, so that's an intellectual, right? More or less rational argument for God. But now there's an even higher way of knowing whether God exists, and you were on the right track, Safin. Would you like to say what you said again?
So, like, before, obviously, your parents, like show you, like, with their religion and stuff like that, so you slowly start believing it. But as you, like, start going a little older, you're like, this is BS, this don't make sense. And then, over time, you just slowly, like, fall apart from the religion, and then you go through something, like, you go through life, and something, like, an experience happens, and then you slowly start to see, okay, this makes sense, and then you slowly start believing God.
Okay, very good, right? So he's talking about personal experience. Rumi's going to go further, but this is already on the level of I've experienced it. Whatever you prove to me now, I know, right? But Rumi actually will go a little further. Epstein, you want to add?
I was going to say, I'm not sure what he said. I was actually going to rephrase it as divine intervention. People have interventions in their life that swing them around.
Okay.
They do a complete 180 in a very short span of time.
Yes. Good.
Because I think that would count as experience.
Yes, you see a shift in the flesh of the person, which before it's not intellectual, it's experiential, right? Anything that's experiential is on the level of intuition, meaning by intuition, sensing, right? Intuition in Plato is not how we see intuition, like, oh, I have a gut feeling. It's not a gut feeling. It's you're actually sensing. If I see the light, I have intuition of the light. I see it, right? If I touch the bottle, I have intuition of the bottle. It's sense perception, right? Now, Rumi actually is going to go deeper. For him, the true knowledge, the intuitive knowledge of God is not just experiences that happen. It's the actual presence of God in the heart. And the moment that happens, the moment you begin to sense or intuit the presence of God in the heart, this is the deepest form of knowledge of God, right? Beyond what you were told, beyond the proofs, this is you experiencing directly the deity. You're experiencing directly God in your heart. And this is a feeling which not all of us have experienced yet, right? I say yet because I have hope for all of us, right? This is an experience probably just a few of us have experienced, this feeling of, you know that this is, right? By the way, this is a radically new idea for the times, right? This is an idea which didn't really exist before. God is always considered outside of us, right? God is transcendent. This is how Islam teaches God, how Judaism teaches God. Christianity came up with this idea that God is within, right? That can dwell within us. And by the way, it wasn't new because the Hindus had it thousands of years before the Christians, right? That God is within. So this idea that God is within, actually radically new idea in the context of Islam, right? It's a very powerful idea that God can actually dwell within us. Remember in the introductory video I told you, right? The throne of God is in the heart of the believer, according to the Sufism, right? So, and you have some elements of that in the Quran also, right? So that's the actual thing. Once you have that feeling, once you have tasted the presence of God, right? Once you have tasted the consolation or the peace, right, that comes, or the joy that comes with that presence inhabiting you, nothing can prove, right, otherwise. Even your friend comes to you and gives you a perfect proof for the non-existence of God, you can be like, I felt it, I know it, it's here. You cannot disprove this intellectually. This is a deeper type of knowledge. Yes?
But isn't that perceived as opinion?
So it's different from opinion because you are actually sensing something outside of yourself, right?
He did, but he didn't. So
No,
for him,
yes.
coming through as the first level of knowledge.
Yes, it is, you're right. Although the first level is I just know it is, you don't have any experience to share, right? You just like, yeah, I just feel it is. But you're right, it sounds, you're so right, I like that, because it does sound like opinion to the person you're talking to. But there's a difference between the person who just hangs on to a belief without knowing why, the very low level of believer, which exists everywhere, right? They're just like, it just has to be true, because otherwise their life will fall apart or something, right? Or they will feel shunned, right, by the people around them. But this is different. This is somebody who actually has felt within themselves a shift, a psychological, emotional shift to a degree that is very powerful and that cannot possibly come from them. I'm wondering if any of you had this experience of, so 1, 2, 3. Okay, so a few of you can connect. So those who didn't, go talk to these people. You're about to know more, right? Yes, Amoroso. You're just raising your hand. Okay, good. Right, this is an experience. I'll give you an example, the way people talk about it, right? You're going through a lot. You're in a complete emotional turmoil. You're unclear. You're confused. You're distraught. You open up to God, and you feel this peace, right? That just comes down, and you're like, and you can finally relax. And then as you continue to dwell in this peace, clarity arises as to what you should do. This is a very powerful experience, and it's a very rare experience, right? Because most of us are so cluttered, right? We are so cluttered that peace God cannot go in. Our vessel, right, needs to be purified too. Most of us have not experienced this because of the clutter in our vessel. And so, of course, we'll talk about the purification of that vessel too, right, so that we can experience these things, right? But this is a very specific experience which you will read everywhere, right? If you read the mystics, if you talk to your grandmother, right? If you go, right, you will, many people across the board, educated or non-educated, have had a moment where they were in total distraught, chaos inside of themselves. They opened up to God and they felt this, right, this peace and clarity. This is also key. You know what to do, right? And you feel absolutely peaceful about it, right? So, and again, this is not an experience which is easy to have, right? Most of us do not have this experience because our vessels are too narrow or too cluttered. And of course, we'll have to talk about how do we open the vessel? How do we unclutter the vessel, right? And that's what we will be doing next time. So let's go now in the text, which we will now better understand, hopefully. Okay. Mystics, no. We'll just read through it, and I'll comment each time. Okay, since wisdom is the true believer's stray camel, he knows it with certainty from whomsoever he may have heard of it. And when he finds himself face to face with it, how should there be doubt? How can he mistake? So this particular part is not connected to what we just talked about. This is another Platonic idea, right? That our soul used to dwell with God, and then came into the earth, and then is journeying back to God, right? So when on the earth, your soul, who knows God, recognizes God in the face of a teacher or in the face of a beloved, you recognize because you used to know, right? This is a very peculiar idea, right? That the soul actually used to dwell in the bosom of God, right? And then fell into your body. But since you remember God, since your soul once dwelt with God, you can recognize God now in the face of certain people, certain teachers, certain masters, and you can then gravitate towards it. We recognize it. Yes? Yes, exactly. That's what in the footnote, right? Where is that? I can't read. Ooh, anamnesia, right? You're in the footnote 1, right? Yes, that's exact, right? Footnote 1?
No, it's the last one. It's like the last sentence.
A saying ascribed to Ali? Do we have? Yes? Okay. The faithful seek the knowledge of God, which they possessed in the past. Yes. That's the idea. Okay, so this is an idea of you have also connected to that idea of reincarnation and so forth. So this is kind of a mystical idea. But when we get now in the text further, now we get into this Platonic idea of the knowledge of the heart. So let's continue. If you tell a thirsty man, here's a cup of water, drink, will he reply, ooh, this is mere assertion, leave me alone, liar, go away? Okay, two kinds of knowledge here, right? Thirsty man, you give him a cup of water, what is happening at that moment? And then who intervenes? Explain to me what this symbol means. Explain to me this little illustration. Man is thirsty, he gets water, right? And then someone comes and, wait, oh yeah, and then, so as he's drinking, is he going to think, I wonder if this is real, right? What is he, right? What's going on here? Can anyone explain to us the story? Yes.
I suppose it's a metaphor for if someone's going through a spiritual turmoil, and then someone says, here, I'll guide you. He's not supposed to doubt it and say, maybe, maybe not. He's supposed to go with it. He's supposed to give himself over.
Almost, because it's not just a guide. He's given water, directly water to quench his thirst. What does this water represent, which is quenching his thirst? Yes? Almost. Yes. The what? Yes, the very presence of God, right? More than the hand, right? Hand can be outside. This is within, right? This water that he is receiving is the absolute fulfillment of his heart's deepest desires, fulfilled, right? Just like you're thirsty materially and water fulfills you completely, there is a way spiritually to be thirsty and to receive complete quenching, right? If you have experienced thirst in the physical realm and receive the water and know how it feels to, the water feels so amazing, you can have the same experience spiritually, right? If you have a thirst for God, one day, right, you might receive this water where you're like, oh my God, this is absolute, exactly, right, what my heart needed to feel or what I needed to hear or what I needed to understand. It could be intellectual, whatever. But it's something that just quenches your thirst, right? satisfies your longing. At that moment, you're not preoccupied whether God exists. He is right there, right? He is right there already in the experience. Does that make sense? So he's differentiating here between intellectual knowledge, which becomes irrelevant, and this kind of absolute intuition, experiential knowledge in your very flesh and blood, right? Same idea here. Suppose a mother cries to her babe, "Come, I am mother. Hark, my child." Will it say to her, "Prove this to me before I take comfort in your milk"? Now, can someone explain that metaphor? Who is the mother in that metaphor? Yes. Okay, God is saying to the child. Who is the child? Okay, what is God saying to us, according to this? Right, take comfort in my presence, right? In other words, and as the baby, do we recognize this mother? Does the baby recognize the mother? Likewise, us, according to the text. We are not, according to this passage, we are naturally drawn to God, right? But many of us are like, trying to be an intelligent baby, right? Prove it first before I go any further, right? We stop the experience. But what he's saying here is that as human beings, we are naturally drawn to the mother. But what stops us is the mind. This can't be true. This is ridiculous. I can't possibly believe this, right? And you feel stupid. But there is a natural pull, according to Rumi. We all have a natural pull towards the divine. And what stops us very often is our mind. And what Rumi seems to be saying is saying, don't be silly. Don't be like that silly baby who wants a proof before he drinks. Drink. That will be your proof. Let me say that again. Rumi is telling us, don't be like that silly baby who wants a proof before he drinks. Rumi would say to the baby, drink, and that will be your proof. He's saying, surrender to the experience. Go for it. See how it feels. Is it real? If it's real, you don't need your mind anymore. You don't need to let your mind become an obstacle on the path of your spiritual journey. That's what Rumi is trying to say. Don't let your mind get between you and your longing for the divine. If you feel the longing, follow. Right? That's the idea. Very nice. Okay. Then there's a few other things about the prophet. And then I'm going to conclude with this last sentence, which is really beautiful. Actually, let me begin. Yeah. That wondrous voice, are you there? Page 12, last sentence. That wondrous voice is heard by the soul in exile, the voice of God calling, "Lo, I am nigh." Okay, this is Old English, so let me translate. Nigh means I am close. I am here, right? So this is what Rumi is talking about. The sense, the sensation, the feeling of the actual presence of God. And where you feel that there is a radical shift psychologically between how you felt in the anguish and the comfort that you received. At that moment, something has taken place which your mind cannot even begin to object to, right? That's what he's talking about. This is the heart is the place where we can know God. Not know intellectually, but know experientially, right? And what's interesting, what Rumi is saying, is that we can trust this knowledge, right? We don't have to dismiss it like, oh, this was just an emotional experience I had and now it's gone, right? We should trust these moments as being real, right? Of course, they're fleeting. That's the problem. Just like, by the way, your mind is fleeting too. You get a moment clarity, it doesn't stay. I mean, if it's true clarity, it will stay, but it's rare when we have these moments of clarity, and we trust them. Likewise, when you have a moment of heart clarity, right? When you have a moment of heart, wow, okay, yes, I feel so relaxed, I feel so appeased, right? We need to also trust our feelings and not just our thoughts. That's what Rumi is inviting us to do. See?
So should we believe that?
What?
Should we believe that?
Between who and who?
Maimonides and...
Yes, they're saying the opposite thing, are they? Not quite, right? I think you can actually tell yourself, yeah, this is interesting, because Maimonides would say, it's the mind ultimately that should, right? But the two are very similar in the sense that the mind and the heart are seen as vessels. So both imply an opening up to an experience which is bigger than us. So you can, I think you can do both, right? Now, if your mind is contradicting your heart, right, Maimonides would tell you to be careful. I think Maimonides, to be honest, is not very, he's not into the knowledge of the heart. So we do have a conflict here, right, between the two philosophers. And it's kind of up to us to decide, well, which one am I going to follow? Because Maimonides would probably say, although, I'm gonna switch now on you. Remember when Maimonides comments on the book of Job? We studied that last time. Where he says, okay, providence is wisdom, but true providence is what? Remember? Can you tell me? Can someone remind C? What is the ultimate form of providence that God offers us? Beyond just wisdom.
All these words.
No, beyond the words. Beyond the mental clarity. Yes? Exactly. Remember, he talks about how ultimately the ultimate feeling the presence of God is the ultimate knowledge, right? So they rejoin. I told you, Maimonides is not a pure rationalist, right? Maimonides has these mystical breakthroughs, and then he falls back on reason. So in that moment, Maimonides is having a mystical breakthrough, where he acknowledges there is the deepest level of knowledge is a sensation of the presence of God, which is knowledge of the heart. So he joins with Rumi here. Does that make sense? But Maimonides is himself, you're right, he is a contradictory man, right? He loves reason, but he has these ecstatic moments where he opens beyond reason, and then he comes back to reason. So Maimonides is ambiguous. He's kind of a rationalist, but he's also, by moments, a mystic. And there are moments where he sounds just like Rumi, right? So, but you're right. At the time when these texts were written, there was a conflict between knowledge of the heart and knowledge of the mind. There's a movie that came out, it's a very old movie, Arab movie, on the philosopher Averroes. I'll spell it for you if you want to see it, Averroes. Remember, this was the contemporary of Maimonides, but in the Muslim world. And there's a movie on him. He's teaching very rational approach, right, like Maimonides. And at the time, there were some Sufis practicing and doing their dancing, you know, and focusing on the knowledge of the heart. And there was actually in the Arab world a tension. So you're right, there was a tension between the rationalists and the mystics. And in the movie, actually, there is an allusion that the mystics can become dangerous, right? So you're right to be careful. But I would add, yes, we have to be careful, but with both. The mind also can lead us astray. You can have if your mind is cluttered and small, you're going to be just as dangerous, right? So it's not so much the heart or the mind. It's if your mind is cluttered, if it's your heart is cluttered, right? You're going to make wrong judgments. If your heart is constantly full of resentment and anxiousness and hatred and confusion, you're not going to feel the presence of God. Just straight up all this. Just accept this. Not going to happen. Right? Whatever you're going to be feeling is some weird thing, right? So that's why I see you're right in pointing out, in doubting, because unless we purify both, we can become dangerous. Both can become dangerous. Both the mind can become dangerous if it is not purified, and the heart can become dangerous if it is not purified. So, which is why the purification is so fundamental. Because with the heart knowledge, if you're all messed up, you can be like, yeah, I feel I should kill you. You know, I feel it. You know, God is pushing me. You can feel it, right? I feel the wrath of God. Right? We have stories like this. I feel the holy wrath of God, and I'm going to come and kill everybody. Or I know, right? God has told me intellectually I should kill you. These are minds and hearts that are narrow and cluttered, and that's why they're seeing everything distorted. So C is right in pointing out that the heart can be dangerous, but so can the mind, right? Which is why the purification is so important. Do I answer your question a little bit?
In a way.
In a way. Okay, good. If you want to talk more, we can, right? Today I'm available. So, okay, great. All right, good. So next time, we will talk about the purification of the heart, right? Very important because he's right, C is right. If the heart is not pure, you might get some weird emotional thing going on, like, which is misguided, right? Which will be dangerous or misguiding you, right? We all have very destructive emotions sometimes, which we feel we should act upon, right? For example, I feel I should, bash you in the face right now, right? Or I feel like I should, kill this person, right? So this is very true. If the heart is off, and sometimes we feel God is the origin of this righteous wrath or righteous anger. How many of you heard the expression righteous anger? This is unpurified heart, right, is going to have righteous anger when it's not legitimate to have anger there, right? So we need to talk about this purification. So next time, we will talk about the purification of the heart. how to declutter and how to purify the heart. And we will have next time this workshop I have been talking to you about on forgiveness, which is fundamental. If you do not know, forgiveness is talked about, but it's not understood. In fact, I have only understood it recently, even though I have been born in these discourses on forgiveness. So it's it's a simple concept, but it has not been really explained. We are told we should forgive, but we have no idea why or how, right? It's like, I can't forgive. How, right? So forgiveness is very important in terms of the purification of the heart. If you don't know how to forgive, your heart will never be pure enough you will not be able to experience these ecstatic states of the divine presence if you do not know how to forgive or declutter the heart. So very important workshop next time we will be doing. Okay, let me stop the recording.